My kids ignored me for years. They still don't know I'm worth $10 million. Thank God. You always know who loves you most by who still checks in when you've got nothing to give. Lorraine Washington pressed her face against the cool kitchen window, watching the Hendersons across the street load their grandchildren into a minivan. 3 little ones, all giggles and sticky fingers, climbing over each other to get to the window seats. Mrs. Henderson was fussing over car seats, while Mr. Henderson carried a cooler that probably held enough sandwiches to feed a small army. Sunday family dinners. Lorraine remembered those. She pulled her worn bathrobe tighter around her 72-year-old frame and turned away from the window. The silence in her house felt heavier on Sundays, like it had weight and substance, pressing down on her shoulders until she had to remind herself to breathe. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, black and still. No missed calls. No text messages. Nothing. Sean was probably at his wife Jessica's parents' house in Alpharetta, eating honey-glazed ham and pretending he didn't have a mother who lived 20 minutes away. Deja would be at some fancy brunch in Buckhead, posting pictures of mimosas and avocado toast to her Instagram while her 2 teenage sons played video games in their bedrooms. And Malik? Well, Malik was probably still sleeping off whatever he'd done Saturday night, assuming he even remembered it was Sunday. Lorraine shuffled to her coffee maker, the same one she'd bought at Walmart 15 years ago when James was still alive and the house still hummed with conversation. She measured out 2 scoops of Folgers, then caught herself and dumped half back. No point in making coffee for 2 when there was only 1. The machine gurgled to life, and she leaned against the counter, studying the collection of school photos magnet to her refrigerator. 27 years of teaching 3rd grade at Carver Elementary, and she still had pictures of students who were now grown with children of their own. Little Antoine from her 1998 class had sent her a graduation photo when he finished college. Shayla from 2003 had mailed her a wedding invitation, even though Lorraine hadn't seen her in 15 years. Her own children? The last school photo she had of any of them was Malik's senior picture from 2001. The coffee finished brewing, and Lorraine poured herself a cup, adding 2 sugars like she always did. She settled into James's old recliner, the one with the worn arms and the springs that squeaked when she leaned back. The morning light slanted through the living room windows, highlighting dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. She thought about calling one of them. Maybe Deja. Her daughter had always been the most predictable of the 3, even if predictable these days meant predictably absent. But what would she say? "Hi, baby, just wanted to hear your voice. Are you busy? Or, do you have a minute for your old mama?" The truth was, she'd stopped calling months ago. Got tired of hearing the surprise in their voices, like they'd forgotten she existed until that very moment. Got tired of the hurried conversations, the background noise of their real lives bleeding through the phone. Got tired of being an interruption. Lorraine sipped her coffee and let her mind wander back to the conversation she'd overheard 3 weeks ago. She'd been early to Malik's apartment. He'd asked her to watch his dog while he went out of town, though he'd never specified where or why. She was fumbling with the spare key he'd given her when she heard voices through the thin door. "I'm telling you, we need to start thinking about this seriously." That was Deja's voice, sharp with impatience. "She's living off Social Security and that little pension from the school district. You know how much teachers make? How much they retire with? Practically nothing." I know. Malik sounded defensive. "But what are we supposed to do? She's too stubborn to move in with any of us." "Because she knows she'd be a burden," Sean chimed in. His voice carried that tone he'd perfected as a child, the one that said he was the oldest and therefore the most reasonable. "Look, she's proud. I get it. But pride doesn't pay bills." "We're going to end up supporting her," Deja continued. "And honestly, I don't know how long we can afford to do that. Trevor's tuition alone is finishing us, and Marcus needs a car next year." "Maybe we should look into senior housing options," Sean suggested. "Something affordable. Assisted, maybe." Lorraine had stood frozen outside that door, key halfway to the lock, feeling something cold settle in her chest. Not anger. She was too tired for anger. Something more like disappointment, but deeper. Like resignation. They thought she was broke. She'd almost laughed out loud right there in the hallway. Her children, who hadn't asked about her finances in years, who never wondered how she maintained the house or paid her bills or managed to send them each $100 check every Christmas, had decided she was struggling. The irony was delicious, in a way that made her stomach hurt. Lorraine took another sip of coffee and pulled out her phone, scrolling to her banking app. The screen loaded slowly. She really did need to upgrade from this old iPhone 7, but there was something to be said for keeping up appearances. Her checking account showed a modest balance, enough to cover groceries and utilities, with a little left over. Exactly what someone living on a teacher's pension might have. But that wasn't the account that mattered. She closed the banking app and opened another one. This one required a fingerprint scan and a 6-digit code. The screen that loaded showed a very different number, 7 figures, with commas that made her heart skip a beat every time she saw them. Elm Root Holdings LLC, named after the massive elm tree that had shaded her childhood home in rural Alabama, the one her grandmother used to sit under while she shelled peas and told stories about making something from nothing. 15 properties, 7 duplexes, 3 single-family homes, 2 small apartment buildings, and 1 commercial space that housed a soul food restaurant and a beauty salon. All of them in neighborhoods that other investors had written off. All of them filled with tenants who paid their rent on time and treated their homes with respect because someone had finally treated them with respect first. It had started with James's life insurance money, $25,000 that she was supposed to use to grieve properly, according to the grief counselor Deja had insisted she see. Instead, she'd driven to the courthouse, paid $300 to register Elm Root Holdings, and spent 6 months learning everything she could about real estate law. The first property had been a disaster. A duplex on the south side that looked like it was held together by prayer and duct tape. But the bones were good, and the previous owner was desperate to sell. She bought it for $8,000 and spent another $5,000 fixing it up, learning to tile bathrooms and patch drywall from YouTube videos while her children assumed she was keeping busy to deal with her grief. Now that duplex brought in $1,400 a month in rent. Lorraine set her phone aside and looked around her living room. Same furniture she'd had for 20 years. Same carpet with a stain near the bookshelf where Malik had spilled grape juice when he was 12. Same curtains she'd sewn herself when money was actually tight and James was working double shifts at the plant. She'd kept everything exactly the same on purpose. Let her children see what they expected to see, a widow getting by, making do, stretching every dollar. It was easier than explaining why she'd chosen this path, why she'd built something in secret, why she'd never asked for their help or their advice or their permission. The truth was, she'd tried to include them once. About 2 years after James died, when she'd bought her third property, she'd invited them all over for dinner and started to tell them about her little real estate venture. But Sean had interrupted her before she'd gotten past, "I've been thinking about investing," launching into a lecture about senior citizens and scam artists and how she needed to be careful about people taking advantage of her grief. Deja had nodded along, adding that maybe Lorraine should run any financial decisions by them first, just to be safe. Malik had been too busy texting to contribute much to the conversation, but he'd looked up long enough to suggest she put her money in a savings account where it would be safe. Safe. Like she was a child who couldn't be trusted with her own decisions. She'd finished serving dinner and never brought it up again. Now, 6 years later, she owned enough real estate to retire anywhere she wanted. She could buy a condo in Florida, a cabin in the mountains, a brownstone in Brooklyn. She could travel the world, hire a housekeeper, eat at restaurants every night if she wanted to. Instead, she sat in James's old recliner on Sunday mornings, drinking Folgers coffee and listening to the silence where her children's voices should have been. Her phone buzzed. For a moment, her heart jumped. Maybe one of them was thinking about her. Maybe someone had remembered that Sunday was a day for family. But it was just a text from Timika, one of her tenants. A single mother with 2 young kids who rented the duplex where Lorraine had started this whole journey. "Good morning, Miss Lorraine. Just wanted to let you know the leaky faucet in the kitchen is fixed. Marcus, my 8-year-old, says thank you for the new basketball hoop. He's been practicing every day. Hope you're having a blessed Sunday. Red heart." Lorraine smiled for the first time that morning. Real warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the cold that had settled there weeks ago outside Malik's apartment. She typed back, "Tell Marcus I expect to see some serious skills next time I visit. Enjoy your Sunday, baby." She set the phone down and looked out the window again. The Hendersons' minivan was gone, probably heading to a park or maybe Grandpa's house for Sunday dinner. Soon, other families on the street would be loading up their cars, heading to churches or restaurants or relatives' houses. Lorraine Washington would stay home, like she did every Sunday. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel quite so alone. She had work to do. "I didn't build this empire for recognition. I built it because I knew no one else was going to save me." 6 years earlier, Lorraine clutched the insurance check in her trembling hands, staring at the number until her eyes watered. $25,000. That's what James's life was worth to the insurance company. $25,000 and a form letter expressing their deepest sympathies for your loss. Deja had already planned how the money should be spent. "Mama, you could use this to fix up the house. Maybe get new carpet, paint the kitchen. Make it feel fresh, you know? Help you heal." Sean had different ideas. "Put it in a CD, Mama. Something safe. Let it grow while you figure out what comes next." Malik hadn't offered suggestions, but he'd hinted heavily about needing help with his car payment. None of them understood that Lorraine wasn't looking to heal or play it safe or bail anyone out. She was looking to survive. The funeral bills had eaten through their savings. James's medical expenses from his final months had devoured everything else. The house was paid off, thank God for that, but the property taxes were going up every year, and her teacher's pension wouldn't stretch far enough to cover everything. She could live modestly, very modestly, on what she had. Clip coupons, shop sales, wear the same clothes until they fell apart. Watch every penny and hope nothing major broke down. Or she could take a chance. That's how she found herself at the downtown library on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the funeral, pulling every book on real estate investing from the shelves. The librarian, a young woman with kind eyes, helped her find books on property law, tenant rights, and real estate finance. "Starting a new business?" the librarian asked. "Something like that," Lorraine replied, settling into a corner table with a stack of books that reached her chin. For 2 months, she lived at that library. She learned about cap rates and cash flow, about landlord responsibilities and eviction processes. She studied city zoning maps and neighborhood demographics. She read about successful investors who'd started with nothing and built empires one property at a time. Most importantly, she learned about city auctions. Every third Thursday of the month, the city auctioned off properties for unpaid taxes. Mostly junk, according to the books. Houses too damaged, or too far gone for most investors to bother with. But sometimes, if you knew what to look for, you could find diamonds in the rough. The first auction Lorraine attended was terrifying. She sat in the back of the courthouse conference room, watching men in expensive suits bid on properties like they were trading baseball cards. They spoke in a language she was still learning, talking about comps and ARV and flip potential. She didn't bid on anything that first day, just watched and listened and tried not to feel completely out of place. The second auction, she raised her hand once. A duplex on Elm Street that everyone else seemed to be ignoring. The auctioneer started the bidding at $5,000. No one else bid, so she got it for the minimum. Walking through that duplex for the first time, Lorraine wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The floors sagged, the windows were cracked, and she was pretty sure something had died in the walls based on the smell. But the structure was solid, and the neighborhood, while rough around the edges, had families who cared about their community. She spent her evenings and weekends learning to be a contractor. YouTube became her best friend. She taught herself to replace outlets, fix leaky pipes, and install vinyl flooring. Every dollar she saved on contractors was a dollar that stayed in her pocket. The transformation took 4 months. When she was done, the duplex looked like a completely different building. Fresh paint, new appliances, secure locks, and a small garden area where kids could play safely. Her first tenants were Maria, a single mother working 2 jobs to support her 3 children, and Robert, an elderly man living on disability who reminded her of her own father. Both had been turned down by other landlords because their income was too low or their credit wasn't perfect. Lorraine didn't care about credit scores. She cared about character. She looked for people who took pride in where they lived, who understood that someone was giving them a chance when others wouldn't. By the time she registered Elmroot Holdings LLC, she owned 3 properties. The name meant something to her. The elm tree in her grandmother's yard had weathered every storm, its roots growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. Her children never asked about the company name when mail started arriving addressed to Elmroot Holdings. If they noticed at all, they probably assumed it was junk mail or some kind of scam, which was exactly what Lorraine wanted them to think. The hardest part wasn't learning the business or fixing up properties or finding good tenants. The hardest part was listening to her children worry about her finances while sitting on a growing fortune. "Mama, you're too proud," Deja would say during their brief phone calls. "If you need help, just ask. We're family." "She won't take money from us," Sean would tell his wife, Jessica, loud enough for Lorraine to hear during family gatherings. "I've tried to help with the electric bill, but she won't have it." Malik was more direct. "Grandma used to ask for help when she needed it. I don't understand why you think you have to do everything alone." They saw her shopping with coupons and driving her 10-year-old Toyota and assumed she was struggling. They interpreted her independence as pride, her self-sufficiency as stubbornness. They never considered that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need their help because she'd figured out how to help herself. Late at night, when Lorraine reviewed her rental income and property values, she sometimes smiled at the irony. Her children thought she was too proud to ask for help, never realizing that their mother had become the kind of person others asked for help. The kind of person who could afford to give it. "They didn't ask if I wanted to move. They just made the decision and called it love." The ambush came on a Wednesday. Lorraine was in her garden, pulling weeds from around her tomato plants, when Deja's silver Lexus pulled into the driveway. Malik climbed out of the passenger seat, smoothing down his shirt like he was preparing for a job interview. Both of them wore expressions that Lorraine recognized from their teenage years, the look they'd get right before confessing they'd broken something expensive. "Hey, Mama," Deja called out, her voice pitched higher than usual. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Lorraine wiped her hands on her gardening apron and stood slowly, letting her arthritis show more than necessary. If they wanted to see a frail old woman, she'd give them exactly that. "It is," she agreed. "Y'all just stopping by to visit?" Malik and Deja exchanged a look that lasted a beat too long. "Actually," Malik said, stuffing his hands in his pockets, "we were wondering if you'd like to take a little drive with us. There's something we'd like to show you." 20 minutes later, Lorraine found herself standing in the lobby of Sunset Manor, a nursing home that tried very hard to not look like a nursing home. The walls were painted in cheerful yellows and soft blues, with fake plants scattered around to give the illusion of life. The smell of disinfectant barely masked something else, something that reminded Lorraine of hospitals and endings. "Isn't this nice?" Deja gushed, taking Lorraine's arm like she might fall over at any moment. "Look at all these activities they have listed. Bingo on Tuesdays, movie nights, even gardening classes." A woman in scrubs approached them with the kind of smile that had been practiced in front of a mirror. "You must be Mrs. Washington. I'm Sandra, the admissions coordinator. Your children have told me so much about you." Lorraine nodded politely while her mind raced. Her children had been talking to this woman, planning, deciding her future without bothering to include her in the conversation. "Let me show you around," Sandra continued, gesturing toward a hallway lined with motivational posters. "We like to think of Sunset Manor as a community where seniors can live their best lives." The tour felt like a performance. Sandra led them through the dining room, where elderly residents sat at round tables picking at plates of food that looked designed more for nutrition than taste. She showed them the activity room, where a handful of people were half-heartedly working on a jigsaw puzzle of a lighthouse. The library contained mostly large print romance novels and outdated magazines. "And here's one of our lovely suites," Sandra announced, opening the door to a room that was barely larger than Lorraine's walk-in closet. A narrow bed, a small dresser, and a chair positioned by a window that looked out onto the parking lot. All utilities included housekeeping twice a week and 3 nutritious meals a day. How much? Lorraine asked quietly. Well, that depends on the level of care needed, Sandra replied smoothly. But for someone as independent as you seem to be, we're looking at about $3,800 a month. Lorraine felt Malik tense beside her. $3,800 was probably more than he made in a month. But don't worry about that right now. Deja jumped in quickly. We can discuss the financial aspects later. After the tour, Sandra left them alone in the lobby while she prepared some paperwork for them to review. So, what do you think, Mama? Deja asked, settling into one of the overstuffed chairs. Doesn't it seem nice? Safe. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining the house anymore, Malik added. No more lawn care or repairs, or any of that stress. Lorraine nodded thoughtfully. It seems very efficient. Exactly. Deja beamed. And you'd have people around all the time. You wouldn't be lonely anymore. They talked for another 10 minutes about the benefits of community living and professional care, but Lorraine barely heard them. She was watching their faces, reading the relief in their expressions. This wasn't about her safety or her loneliness. This was about their guilt. As they walked back to the car, Lorraine excused herself to use the restroom. Instead, she positioned herself around the corner where she could hear their conversation. I think she's actually considering it, Deja said, her voice excited. Did you see how she was nodding? Thank God, Malik replied. I was worried she'd put up a fight. The timing is perfect, too. If we can get her moved by the end of the month, we can list the house before the market slows down for winter. How much do you think we can get for it? Realtor I talked to said maybe 120, 130 if we're lucky. It needs work, but the lot is decent sized. Split 3 ways, that's what, $40,000 each. Plus whatever she's got in savings. Can't be much, Deja said. You know how teachers' pensions are. But hey, $40,000 is $40,000. Marcus needs a car, and Trevor's college fund could use the boost. And I could finally get caught up on my credit cards. Lorraine pressed her back against the wall, feeling something sharp and cold settle in her chest. They were already spending her money, already dividing up her life like she was already gone. The drive home was quiet. Deja and Malik seemed lost in their own thoughts, probably calculating expenses and planning purchases. Lorraine stared out the window at her neighborhood, where she owned more property than anyone realized. We don't need an answer today, Mama, Deja said as they pulled into the driveway. Just think about it, okay? Think about how much easier life could be. After they left, Lorraine sat in her kitchen for a long time, staring at the business card Sandra had pressed into her hand. Call when you're ready. It said on the back in Sandra's neat handwriting. Finally, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Richardson Law Offices, this is Patricia. Patricia, this is Lorraine Washington. I need to speak with Mr. Richardson about updating my will. Of course, Mrs. Washington. How soon would you like to come in? Lorraine looked around her kitchen in her house, bought and paid for with money her children assumed she didn't have. How about tomorrow morning? I'll put you down for 9 o'clock. Lorraine hung up and smiled for the first time all day. If her children wanted to make decisions about her life without including her, she could make a few decisions of her own, starting with who would inherit what was left when she was actually gone. My kids saw me as a burden, but my tenants? They brought me groceries when I had the flu. The knock on Lorraine's door came at 7:30 in the morning, soft and tentative. She shuffled to the front window and peered through the curtains, expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe one of the Hendersons from across the street. Instead, she saw Tamika standing on her porch, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and her 8-year-old son Marcus's hand in the other. Her daughter Keisha, barely 6, was hiding behind her mother's legs, clutching a folded piece of construction paper. Lorraine opened the door with a genuine smile, the first real one she'd managed since yesterday's nursing home ambush. Well, good morning, babies, she said, immediately switching to the warm voice she reserved for people who actually mattered to her. What brings you by so early? Tamika shifted nervously, the way she always did when she thought she might be imposing. Even after 2 years of renting from Lorraine, the young woman still seemed surprised that her landlord actually cared about her family's well-being. "I'm sorry to bother you, Ms. Lorraine," Tamika said, her voice soft but determined. "I know it's early, but Marcus insisted we come by before school." "We made you something," Marcus announced, bouncing on his toes with the boundless energy of an 8-year-old. The basketball hoop Lorraine had installed in their backyard had clearly been put to good use. The boy had filled out over the summer, and his confidence had grown along with his jump shot. Keisha stepped forward and thrust the construction paper toward Lorraine. "I drew you a picture," she whispered. Lorraine unfolded the paper carefully, as if it were made of fine silk instead of dollar store craft supplies. The drawing showed a stick figure with gray hair standing next to a house, surrounded by flowers and what appeared to be a very large sun. At the bottom, in crayon letters that leaned in every direction, it read, "Thank you, Ms. Lorraine, for being the best." "Oh, honey," Lorraine breathed, feeling her throat tighten. "This is beautiful. Just beautiful." "She worked on it for 3 hours last night," Tamika said, pride evident in her voice. She kept erasing the sun because she wanted it to be perfect. Lorraine crouched down to Keisha's level, her knees protesting but her heart full. "Baby girl, this is the most perfect sun I've ever seen. Can I hang it on my refrigerator?" Keisha nodded vigorously, finally smiling. "And these flowers," Tamika said, holding out the bouquet. "They're from the garden you helped me plant. The marigolds and zinnias came in so pretty this year." Lorraine accepted the flowers, remembering the Saturday she'd spent helping Tamika turn a patch of weedy backyard into something beautiful. They'd gone to Home Depot together, Lorraine paying for the soil and seeds while pretending it was just leftover from her own garden project. "Would you like some coffee?" Lorraine asked. "I was just about to make a fresh pot." "Oh no, we can't stay," Tamika said quickly. "I've got to get the kids to school, and I don't want to be late for work. I just wanted to say thank you." "Thank me for what, baby?" Tamika's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "For everything. For fixing the hot water heater so fast when it broke last month. For letting us pay rent late that time when Keisha got sick and I had to miss work. For treating us like we matter." The words hit Lorraine like a physical blow. Here was a young woman thanking her for basic human decency, for treating her family with respect and dignity instead of like a problem to be managed. "You do matter," Lorraine said firmly. "Don't you ever doubt that." After they left, Lorraine sat at her kitchen table for a long time, staring at Keisha's drawing. She thought about her conversation with her lawyer yesterday, about the changes she was making to her will. Then she thought about her children's excited whispers outside the nursing home, already planning how to spend money from selling her house. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her property management app. 15 properties, 47 tenants, including 12 children under the age of 10. Real people with real lives, who called her when their pipes froze or their air conditioners died or their kids needed someone to cheer at their school plays. At 10 a.m., she started her monthly rounds. First stop was the duplex on Maple Street, where Mrs. Dorothy lived with her grandson Kevin. Dorothy was 78 and had been taking care of Kevin since he was 5, when his mother disappeared and his father proved himself useless. Now Kevin was 16 and working part-time at a grocery store to help with expenses, but he still found time to mow Mrs. Dorothy's lawn every weekend without being asked. "Miss Lorraine," Dorothy called from her porch, where she was shelling peas into a metal colander. "Perfect timing, baby. Come sit with me for a minute." They talked about Kevin's plans for college and Dorothy's arthritis and the new family that had moved in next door. Real conversation, the kind Lorraine's children never seemed to have time for anymore. Next was the 4-unit building on Oak Avenue, where she collected rent from Roberto, a construction worker who sent half his paycheck to his elderly parents in Guatemala. He handed her an envelope containing exact change, as he did every month, along with a thermos of the coffee his wife made, the good stuff that reminded Lorraine of the Cuban coffee she'd tried on her honeymoon in Miami 30 years ago. Her final stop was the single-family house on Pine Street, where the Jenkins family had lived for 3 years. Mr. Jenkins worked nights at the plant, Mrs. Jenkins cleaned houses during the day, and their twin daughters were the top students in their 6th grade class. "Ms. Washington," Mrs. Jenkins said, stepping onto the porch with a covered dish, "I made too much cornbread last night. Figured you might like some." Lorraine accepted the still warm bread, knowing full well that Mrs. Jenkins had made it specifically for her. It happened every month, a covered dish, a batch of cookies, fresh vegetables from someone's garden. Her tenants taking care of her the same way she took care of them. As she drove home that evening, Lorraine's phone rang. Deja's number appeared on the screen. "Hey, Mama," her daughter said when she answered. "I was just calling to see if you'd had time to think about Sunset Manor. I know it's a big decision." Lorraine looked out her car window at the neighborhood she'd quietly helped transform over the past 6 years. Properties that had been drug houses and crack dens were now homes where children played in front yards and elderly people sat on porches without fear. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "but I'm not quite ready to make any decisions yet." "Well, don't wait too long," Deja said. "Good places like that fill up fast. And honestly, Mama, I worry about you being all alone in that big house." "Alone?" Lorraine almost laughed. She'd had more meaningful human interaction in one morning than she usually had with her own children in a month. "I'll let you know," she promised and hung up. That night, she called her lawyer again. "Mr. Richardson? It's Lorraine Washington. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I'd like to make a few more changes to my will." They thought they were getting an inheritance. I handed them a business plan instead. Lorraine spent all of Saturday preparing. Not the meal. She'd ordered catering from Gladys's Kitchen, the soul food restaurant that operated out of one of her commercial properties. No, she was preparing something else entirely. She cleared off her dining room table and set up her laptop, connected to the large monitor she'd bought last month specifically for this occasion. 3 manila folders sat stacked neatly to one side, each labeled with a child's name. Her old briefcase, the one she'd carried to parent-teacher conferences for 27 years, sat open beside her printer as it churned out page after page of financial documents. Property photos, profit and loss statements, rental agreements, bank statements showing deposits that would make her children's eyes water. At exactly 5 p.m., she heard car doors slamming in her driveway. Through the window, she watched her 3 children approach her front door with the resigned expressions of people fulfilling an obligation. Sean carried a bottle of wine that probably cost $12. Deja had her phone pressed to her ear, finishing what sounded like a work call. Malik brought nothing except the look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Hey, Mama," Sean said when she opened the door, kissing her cheek dutifully. "House smells good." "Thank you, baby. Y'all come on in." They settled into the living room with the careful distance they'd maintained since becoming adults. Deja finally hung up her phone and made a show of giving Lorraine her attention. Malik sprawled in James's old recliner like he owned it. "So," Deja said, jumping straight to business, "have you given any more thought to Sunset Manor? I drove by there yesterday and the grounds are really beautiful. Very peaceful." "I've been thinking about a lot of things," Lorraine replied carefully. "In fact, that's why I asked y'all to come over tonight. There's something I need to discuss with you." The 3 of them exchanged glances. "Here it comes," their expressions said. The guilt trip, the plea for help, the admission that she couldn't take care of herself anymore. "But first," Lorraine continued, "let's eat." Dinner was awkward in the way family dinners had become over the past few years. Polite conversation about work and weather, with undercurrents of impatience. Deja kept checking her phone. Malik ate quickly, like he was planning to leave as soon as possible. Sean made stilted small talk about his job at the insurance company. None of them asked about her week, her health, or how she'd been spending her time. They never did anymore. After they finished eating, Lorraine stood up and smoothed down her dress, the navy blue one she'd worn to every important meeting for the past decade. "If y'all would move to the dining room, I have a presentation I'd like to share with you." "A presentation?" Malik looked confused. "Mama, what kind of presentation?" "You'll see." They filed into the dining room, stopping short when they saw the setup. The laptop, the monitor, the folders, the briefcase full of documents. It looked like a corporate boardroom, not their mother's dining room. "Please sit down," Lorraine said, gesturing to the chairs she'd arranged facing the monitor. They sat slowly, their confusion now mixed with something that might have been concern. Lorraine moved to the front of the room and clicked to her first slide. The Elmroot Holdings logo appeared on the screen, a stylized elm tree with roots that stretched across the bottom of the image. "Welcome," she said in the voice she'd once used to address the school board, "to the annual family meeting for Elmroot Holdings, LLC." Silence. Elmroot Holdings, she continued, clicking to the next slide, is a property management and investment company that I founded 6 years ago with an initial investment of $25,000. The next slide showed a map of the city with red pins marking her properties. 15 pins scattered across neighborhoods they probably didn't even recognize. Today, the company manages 15 properties with a total value of approximately $2.3 million. Deja's mouth fell open. Sean leaned forward in his chair like he was trying to see the screen more clearly. Malik just stared. "Our current monthly rental income is $18,400, Lorraine continued, advancing to a spreadsheet that showed numbers in neat columns. After expenses, the company nets approximately $12,000 per month in profit. She let that sink in for a moment. $12,000 a month. More than any of them made in their regular jobs. Over the past 6 years, Elmroot Holdings has provided stable, affordable housing to 47 families while generating a cumulative profit of just over $800,000. The room was so quiet Lorraine could hear the air conditioner cycling on. "Questions so far?" she asked. Sean found his voice first. "Mama, what? How did you? How did I what, baby? How did I learn to read property surveys? How did I figure out cap rates and cash flow analysis? How did I build relationships with contractors and property managers and city inspectors?" She clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of her first duplex, before and after renovation. "I went to the library. I read books. I asked questions. I made mistakes and learned from them, just like any other business owner. But why didn't you tell us?" Deja's voice was barely above a whisper. Lorraine studied her daughter's face, the shock, the confusion, and underneath it all, the dawning realization of what this meant. "When did I stop telling you things, Deja? Was it when you interrupted me to lecture about scam artists? Or was it when you suggested I run my financial decisions by you first, like I was a child who couldn't be trusted?" She moved to the table and picked up the 3 folders, handing one to each of them. These contain details about the properties, tenant information, financial projections for the next 5 years, and my succession plan for the company. Their hands shook as they opened the folders. Inside were professional presentations that could have come from any major real estate firm. Property photographs, market analyses, profit projections that stretched into the millions. "The business is currently valued at just over $4 million, Lorraine said matter-of-factly. That includes the properties, cash reserves, and projected future earnings. Malik looked up from his folder, his face pale. "4 million? Mama, are you saying you're a millionaire?" Lorraine finished. "Several times over, actually." The silence stretched so long that Lorraine wondered if she'd broken them. Finally, Sean spoke. "Why are you showing us this now?" Lorraine moved back to the front of the room and looked at each of her children in turn. "Because yesterday you took me to tour a nursing home without asking if I wanted to go. Because you've spent weeks talking about selling my house and dividing up my little bit of savings. Because you've made decisions about my life without including me in the conversation." "We were trying to help," Deja said weakly. "No," Lorraine replied firmly. "You were trying to manage what you saw as a problem. You stopped seeing me as a person capable of making my own decisions the minute you decided I was poor and helpless." She clicked to her final slide, which showed a simple statement. Elmroot Holdings, LLC, building wealth, building community, building legacy. "I didn't build this company for recognition," she said. "I built it because I knew no one else was going to save me. And you know what I discovered? I didn't need saving. I needed purpose. I needed to matter to people who actually see me. Malik finally found his voice. But Mama, why didn't you ever tell us? We could have helped. We could have been part of this. Lorraine looked at her youngest child and felt something sad and final settle in her chest. Because y'all stopped listening the minute I said I didn't need help. She powered down the laptop and began gathering her papers. Your folders contain my contact information for my lawyer, my accountant, and my property manager. If you have questions about the business, they can help you. What does this mean for us? Sean asked. I mean, for the future? For your will. Lorraine paused in her packing. That depends. On what? She looked around the dining room where she'd just shattered every assumption her children had about her life. On whether you're here because you love me or because you love what you think I might leave you. None of them had an answer for that. They ignored me when they thought I was poor. That silence saved me from choosing the wrong heirs. 3 months later, Lorraine sat on her front porch in the same rocking chair she'd occupied for 15 years, sipping sweet tea from the same glass pitcher she'd inherited from her mother. The October air carried the scent of burning leaves and wood smoke, and across the street, the Hendersons were hanging Halloween decorations with their grandchildren. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sean. Hey Mama, just checking in. How are you feeling today? Need anything from the store? She smiled and set the phone aside without responding. Not out of spite, but because she'd learned to recognize performance when she saw it. The sudden surge of attention from her children over the past 3 months had been as predictable as it was transparent. Deja called twice a week now, always with carefully crafted questions about her health, her plans, her needs. Malik had started dropping by every Sunday, bringing takeout and staying for awkward conversations about the weather and his job. Sean sent regular texts and had even offered to help with property management, now that he understood what that meant. They were trying, she supposed, but it felt like watching actors rehearse a play they'd never bothered to learn while the original was running. The front gate creaked, and Lorraine looked up to see Tamika walking up the path with a covered dish in her hands. No phone call, no appointment, no agenda beyond simple human kindness. Afternoon, Ms. Lorraine, she called out. Made too much cornbread again. Come sit with me, baby, Lorraine replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. I was just thinking how quiet it's been today. Tamika settled into the chair and handed over the dish. How's Marcus doing with his homework these days? Lorraine asked. Getting better. That tutor you recommended has been a godsend. His math grades are up, and he's actually excited about school again. Lorraine had paid for the tutor, of course, though she'd told Tamika it was part of a community education program that Elm Root Holdings sponsored. Which wasn't technically a lie. She'd formalized several such programs over the past few months. And how are you doing, sweetheart? Really? Tamika was quiet for a moment, watching her kids play in the front yard. Better than I've been in years, honestly. Having a stable place to live, a landlord who actually cares, it changes everything. Keisha's not having nightmares anymore. Marcus is making friends. I can actually save a little money each month instead of just surviving. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood come alive with after-school activity. Children on bicycles, parents walking dogs, elderly folks checking their mail and stopping to chat with neighbors. Ms. Lorraine, Tamika said eventually, can I ask you something? Of course. Your kids, they seem different lately. More present, I guess? That's good, right? Lorraine considered the question carefully. They're certainly more attentive, she said finally. But attention that comes with strings attached isn't the same as love, baby. Real love shows up when there's nothing to gain. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Deja. Mama, I was thinking about Thanksgiving. Would you like us to host this year? We could take some of the stress off you. Lorraine deleted the message without reading it twice. Stress. As if cooking a meal she'd prepared dozens of times was somehow beyond her capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she'd wondered if her children would miss her when she was gone. Now she knew they wouldn't miss her. They'd miss her money. That knowledge should have hurt more than it did. I need to tell you something, Lorraine said to Tamika. About your rent. Tamika tensed, the way she always did when conversations turned to money. Is everything okay? I know I was 2 days late last month, but everything's fine, Lorraine interrupted gently. Actually, everything's more than fine. I've been working with my lawyer on some changes to my estate planning, and I wanted you to know that the house you're renting, it's going to be yours. Tamika stared at her. I'm sorry, what? When I'm gone, the deed to your house will transfer to you. Free and clear. It'll be yours to keep, to sell, to pass down to your children. Whatever you want. Tears started flowing down Tamika's cheeks before she could stop them. Ms. Lorraine, I can't. Why would you? Because you've been more family to me these past few years than my own blood, Lorraine said simply. You check on me when I'm sick. You include me in your children's lives. You see me as a person, not a problem to be solved. She reached over and took Tamika's hand. Besides, you're not the only one. Mrs. Dorothy is getting her duplex. The Jenkins family is getting their house. Several others are getting significant portions of my commercial properties. What about your children? Lorraine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They'll be provided for. They'll each receive exactly what they gave me over the past 6 years, conditional love, carefully measured. As the sun began to set, Tamika gathered her children and headed home, still wiping tears from her eyes. Lorraine remained on the porch, watching the street lights flicker on one by one. Her phone rang. Malik's number.
Hey, Mama.
I was wondering if you'd like to go to dinner tomorrow night. Just the two of us. Catch up. That sounds nice, she said, though they both knew it wasn't really about catching up. After she hung up, Lorraine thought about the housing scholarship she'd established the previous week. The Lorraine Washington Foundation for Single Mothers would provide down payment assistance and home-buying education for women who reminded her of herself 40 years ago, women who needed a chance, not charity. She thought about the community center she was planning to build on the vacant lot next to Gladys's kitchen. A place where kids could get tutoring, where elderly folks could gather, where families could access resources without judgment. She thought about her children, who would inherit enough money to be comfortable, but not enough to be careless. They'd get trust funds that required them to work, to contribute to their communities, to earn their inheritances through action rather than assumption. Most of all, she thought about the gift her children had unknowingly given her. By ignoring her when they thought she was poor, they'd revealed their true character. They'd saved her from the mistake of leaving her legacy to people who saw her as an obligation rather than a treasure. The silence she'd interpreted as abandonment had actually been a blessing. It had forced her to build a chosen family among people who valued her for who she was, not what she might leave behind. A cool breeze rustled the leaves on her elm tree, the one she'd planted the year after James died, the one that had grown strong and tall while she built her empire in secret. Lorraine Washington rocked gently in her chair and smiled. Some roots ran deeper than blood, and some legacies were too important to leave to chance.